So these are profound things that, as social beings, that we deal with. One of the things that we would have been that we will be speaking of again on our rescheduled retreat, whether it's a virtual retreat or a live retreat, we'll have to wait to see.
I want live. I want live.
Yeah, live would be great. Yeah, and we're so fortunate to have Cricket agree to be with us. I've known Cricket for a long time, 25 years or more. So Cricket was only 3 when I first met her, and I was a strapping boy of 6. And so in all that time, some of the gifts that Cricket has to share with us will allow us to navigate these challenging times. Cricket is one of the few graduates from the it's actually a wonderful center in California that is the Grief Recovery Institute, and Cricket has developed a course that she's been in a process called the Triumph Over Trauma process, which enables people to deal with all kinds of loss. And we are dealing with loss. We're dealing with loss of freedom. We're dealing with loss of seeing our loved ones. And you, Corinne, are dealing with the loss of not being able to see your mom face to face, and the loss of being able to hug each other and to travel around freely. The loss of income, the loss of life that we once understood it to be, the uncertainty, all kinds of things like that. And Cricket is very skilled in being able to help people individually navigate through these kinds of losses, whether it's a broader loss or an individual loss of a loved one, or pets, or whatever it might be. And this is a process that she's been studying for a long time. I have tremendous respect for Cricket's talents and abilities and gifts. In addition to that, Cricket is well versed in every facet of health and well-being, including she's an accomplished yoga instructor, and she also runs a sanctuary north of the city in Eudora, as you've guessed, Eugene, where she takes care of animals that have been abandoned or abused. And so Cricket's heart is just immense and loving, and we're blessed to have her here. And over the next few minutes, we've asked Cricket to do the impossible, and that is to give us to touch upon some of the things that could be helpful takeaways for everybody on the call, which would be several weeks to learn to master this. But Cricket has come to and agreed to do this, and to perhaps enable us to have some key tools that you can start to implement or to consider to assist in this period of loss and separation and grieving. So with that, I'll hand it over to my friend, Cricket Olivia Profar.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Philip. And thank you, Jackie, for, allowing me to participate in your group today. And I'm so glad to meet everybody. It's so nice. Can you hear me? Yeah. I tend to not speak very loudly. So I'm going to try and condense information about grief into, you know, a 10 or 15-minute talk. I'll do my best to give you the meaty parts of about grief. Grief and trauma are inseparable, and this is something that people don't understand. Trauma is about loss, and grief is the response to loss. So trauma can be anything. Trauma can be something very obvious, like a traumatic event. You see somebody actually, you know, being killed in a car accident, let's say. That's one aspect of trauma. The other aspect of trauma is what that does to you, how that imprints in your psyche. And it's different for all of us. So where grief comes in is grief is all about emotions, and that's why we don't talk about it. We can talk about death. You just, you know, pre-pandemic, you turn on the TV and the first few stories are always about death, right? But they're not about grief, which is the healing aspect of dealing with death and loss. And the reason is because grief is about feelings and emotions. There's this beautiful quote. It's an anonymous one. I really should claim it for myself, but it is an anonymous one. It says, and I hope you guys can relate to this. You probably will. It says, "I sat with my anger long enough until she told me her real name was grief."
Oh, wow.
That's beautiful.
And one of the things that is, you know, one of the takeaways that I hope you guys, you know, certainly absorbed from this is unresolved and unprocessed grief and trauma are 99.9% the reason why a person is developing, has developed some sort of illness, whether it's an emotional illness, mental illness, physical illness. And unfortunately, because the medical profession is not trained in recognizing grief and trauma unless they've specialized in it, they don't recognize that the person in front of them is grieving. What they do tend to recognize are just the symptoms. So what are the presenting symptoms of grief? There are many. Some of the key ones are, as I just mentioned, anger, but what we're really seeing a huge increase rate now, because we are globally grieving, anxiety, depression, fear, a sense of hopelessness, of helplessness, of overwhelm, confusion. So those, I mean, that's just the tip of the iceberg in terms of some of the presenting feelings and emotions. So you can imagine, and I'm sure that everybody's listening to this this broadcast can relate to those feelings. So you can imagine you go to your GP or even a specialist, and if they don't recognize that what they're really seeing is connected with grief, then what they're going to do is it's usually offer, you know, a medication to treat what they're seeing, which is just the symptoms. So what does that matter? Well, in terms of healing, until and unless you are willing to look at what is underneath the symptoms, what is underneath the presenting symptoms, and be willing to look at the grief and the trauma, then those symptoms will continue. They will press. They will continue on. They will continue until they manifest into, possibly some very serious illness. So with the grief recovery methodology that I learned from the Grief Institute, there's a very specific way to process grief. You can't talk away grief. You can't talk away trauma. That's why traditional therapy, psychotherapy, doesn't work, because grief and trauma they're a holistic problem, meaning that they've affected you on all levels of yourself, mentally, physically, emotionally, spiritually, and therefore they have to be, the healing techniques have to be addressed in a holistic approach. And that's one of the sort of missing keys or missing elements in sort of mainstream therapy around grief and trauma. And I two of my absolute heroes in mainstream medicine are Dr. Gabor Mate and Dr. Bessel van der Kolk, mainstream doctors specializing in trauma and loss and grief, but they've recognized this, and they realize that it must be a body, mind, and soul type of healing. That's what my program does. It addresses all of that, brings yoga into it. It's certainly got the talk therapy aspect too, but it also, there are certain things that you need to do, like journaling and such, that all these different aspects that need to be brought into play in order to sufficiently heal. So just healing, what is it in terms of what I'm talking about here? It's becoming whole again. What is recovery? Recovery means recovering those broken bits and parts, those fragmentation of yourself that have been lost over the years. So when we talk about loss, as Philip alluded to, and what Eugene just went through, in that respect, in the situation with the Canadian Tire, what the loss was there, it is, a loss of respect, right? A loss of dignity. And it's not as in your face as an actual physical death, but it is equally as potent when it comes to how it affected you. Now, I've lost them. I don't know if they've gone or not.
Oh, they're there.
Are they there? Okay.
Yeah, just turned off the camera.
Okay, so is this making sense so far?
Yep.
Yes.
Okay, so just, in terms of loss, and I'm trying to condense this very quickly. Obviously, there's the physical loss of a loved one or a family pet. But then there are the intangible losses. And as I'm saying this, you can just sort of start to calculate in your own mind how many losses you probably have. So loss of faith, loss of trust, loss of certainly a job, loss of security, loss of finances, loss of a relationship, loss of health and wellness. A move is considered a loss. The friends and family that you were around, now you've moved away from them. And even though that may be a joyful experience, still there will be in your psyche, there's a loss there, because the broader definition of loss is anytime there's a break in a relationship. And everything is a relationship. You have a relationship, obviously, with your loved ones, but you also have a relationship with your job, your car, your your home. Like, everything is a relationship. And anytime there's a coming apart of that or an actual breaking of that, there is loss, and that's where grief starts to come in. Grief, for those of you who are familiar with Dr. David Hawkins' scale of consciousness, grief is a very dense energy. I think it's like the third one from the bottom. I don't know, Philip, if you remember, it's shame and then something, and then I think grief is the third one.
Yeah,
So
it's around 20.
So when we're talking about, I'm talking to a higher consciousness community here, which is great because I can talk in higher consciousness language. When we're talking about vibrational frequencies, grief is a very dense frequency. Trauma is a very dense frequency. It has to be released from the body because otherwise it will go into the cells and tissues, and it has no place else to go. So it's so important. I can't stress it enough that to go through to do that work. What is the work? As I alluded to a bit, there is you need to have. This is key. You need to have a witnessing presence. Someone who understands grief. No one will understand your grief, but someone who understands grief. Because we all grieve differently and we all express it differently. Some people can look like they're not grieving. They can look like they haven't been fazed at all by a loss. But we never know what's going on in a person's heart, right? So one of the key things is to have a witnessing presence, someone who will hear your story, who will listen to you. That's so important. So that starts the process of bringing those emotions up and out. And sadly, in this day and age, men are still, not encouraged to cry, and women are still not encouraged to get angry. Well, tears and anger are both part of the grieving process. So you can see where there's a problem right there. So that's part of what needs to happen is you need to have a witnessing presence, someone who will hold the space for you without judgment and with understanding and knowledge, and then the skills to take you through, to navigate you through the next steps. What are the next steps? Well, as I said, something like, my program, there's a journaling aspect. There's a listing of the losses. There's certainly an understanding and a knowledge, developing the knowledge of what grief is, how it presents, and to be able to recognize it when it starts to rear its head. Bringing in, physical modalities that will help the body to actually express the energy. So I use certain things in my yoga therapy program. There's certain things that really work well for bringing grief up and out. And then finally getting the completion. In the grief recovery method, we talk about completion versus closure, because what we found is closure tends to be more about, I don't want to talk about this anymore. I don't want to look at it anymore. And it's a closing of the door of actually processing things. Completion is very different. Even the word completion suggests that something comes to an end. And that's what we're doing. We're bringing the pain of the loss, whatever the loss is, we're bringing the pain of the loss to an end. So people say to me, well, I don't want to forget my loved one. Let's say if it's loss of a loved one, you will never forget the loved one. But what we want to do is get you into a space through all of these modalities where you can recall the memories, but you're neutral. It's not gutting you. You don't still have these circuits of energy invested in the past relationships that are gone, that are no longer exist except in your mind. And our mind is not our ally. A lot of the time, our mind is not our ally, and that's why we, in this work, we're working more with the heart, because as you know, the mind can torment us. And Eugene was talking about that, kind of keeping him awake at night about the situation with Canadian Tire. So part of working through grief is learning how to work with your heart and taming your mind. And I always say to people that the good news is, because grief is a response, it's not a disorder, it is very healable. Disorders, that's a little different, the permanent and pervasive, but responses, and when I'm working with people with complex post-traumatic stress response, it's the same thing. Responses, which are learned, can be unlearned. So that's the good news. The challenge is, does a person want to, go deep and wide? And but that's why you have practitioners like Jackie and Philip and myself to guide you through that. Just one other thing about grief, if one of the side effects can be addictions. If it's unprocessed and unresolved. We call them STRBs, they're supposed to be short-term energy relieving behaviors, which can, if the grief and trauma aren't resolved, then those short-term energy relieving behaviors can actually flip over into long-term disabilities of addiction. And addiction can be anything. It can be addicted to a process, like gaming and gambling, shopping. It can be to a substance, smoking, drinking, whatever, or it can be an addiction of a personality. You become a bitter person. You become a person with an attitude. That can be an addiction too. And you can also become addicted to your story. Am I out of time now?
No, keep going. I'm nodding because that just resonated completely with me.
Okay, so and not to diss anything, but just to be, I'm being honest here. That's why 12-step programs don't usually work, because I've operated 12-step programs before, support programs. You can't just keep telling your story. You can't just keep feeding the monster of your story. Tell it again, tell it again, tell it again, and keep identifying every week. Hello, my name is Cricket and I'm an alcoholic. That's why support programs don't work. They have like about an 8% effectiveness rate, and almost 50% of the people drop out in the first year. They're good as a support, I guess, for some people, yes. But what you really want to do is recover. You don't want to just be supported. You want to recover and stand on solid emotional ground again. When a person has unresolved grief and unresolved trauma, like your feelings are raw. It's like we call it emotional dysregulation. Anything can knock you off balance. And the longer time it goes and the more those feelings and emotions percolate and take over your psyche and your personality, the more bitter and touchy you can become about anything. And you can actually become very stuck in victim mode, which is where, everybody else's fault that you feel the way you do, which isn't the truth, right? So that's a very short definition of an explanation of what grief is, and why it's so important to do your work to resolve it, identify. And you may not always know right off the bat what the deeper losses are, and that's okay. They will present themselves as your psyche feels safe enough to reveal them to you. That's the beautiful thing. We have that part of ourselves that loves us so much. It gives you this information as you need it and as it knows that you're able to handle it. So I've had people go through the program and, call me a month later and say, oh, there's more. I've come up with about, other things that I'm recalling now, but they're in such a solid frame of mind now, they can come in, do the work, and it's a much quicker process for them to release and recover. They still needed that witnessing presence, however, to do the guiding at that time. So I'm excited about it, as you can tell, because people don't have to suffer. Suffering is a choice, and people don't have to suffer. But it's surprising how many people do not know about, well, the grief recovery program. I'm amazed, I'm shocked that so few Canadians know about it. But I am so grateful to Philip and Jackie for allowing me to talk a bit about, the fact that there is a process out there that can help.
Cricket, if anybody on the call wanted to find out more information, could they get that from your website? And what's your website?
Absolutely. www.myselfmasterycoach.com.
myselfmasterycoach.com.
And
Okay.
you know what? I'll put a little tag at the end of the recording
Great.
with your website, Cricket. So
Oh, okay, thank you.
Because I know you've got some good resources on there. So
Yes, and I actually have a home study online program now that people can access. So anyone in the world can can do the work.
yeah. So whoever's listening to this YouTube video broadcast, they can access it wherever wherever they are in the world. Great.
Yeah.
Okay.
nice.
Well, Cricket, thank you so much for sharing your
Yes,
wisdom. I know it's a big topic, and we asked a lot of you to try to encapsulate, just to scratch the surface a little bit. And
But it's so interesting how incredibly timely that was.
yes, of course
right?
it's going to be timely.
Yeah.
Because that's how the universe works. And Jackie, with everyone's permission, I'm going to suggest we go just a few minutes over. Would that be okay with everybody? Like 4 or 5 minutes over?
Yeah.
Is that okay with you, Jackie? And
Yes,
Eugene?
yeah.
And Carolyn and Corinne? Okay. Well, so you've heard a lot. So right now, what I'll invite you to do is to just sit comfortably or lie back and allow your physical vessel to be at ease. You've been listening rapidly, I'm sure, to what Cricket has to say, and now you're just allowing yourself to be relaxed and at peace. I invite you to listen to the sound of my voice and for you to begin to notice the rhythm of your breathing. It's something that you've done many times on these calls. Just noticing the rise and fall of your chest, noticing, witnessing, and observing how your breath occurs without any effort. And just noticing that, taking a few deep, pleasurable breaths right now. And as you give yourself this gift, I'll invite you to become aware that each time you breathe in, you become a little more relaxed. How might that be if that was the case? It might feel as if you were breathing in relaxation from the fabric of the universe, of which you are an inextricable part. So you are breathing in you, and you are becoming more relaxed and at ease. This space that we've created with love and light here is your safe healing place of transformation and upliftment. Just allowing yourself to settle and to relax. And noticing that your physical vessel is relaxed from the tip of your toes to the top of your head. You might begin to feel that your limbs and your torso and your head are pleasantly heavy. It's a very pleasant sensation. You are surrendering to you. This is your safe, sacred healing time. And as you know from our previous times together, and as you remember that you are an infinite being of love and light already, you're already an infinite being of love and light. and you were experiencing certain adventures, we'll say. Adventures that enable you to perceive in a much greater way. And because you are an infinite being of love and light, and because you are an energetic, creative being, in your mind's eye, now, you can begin to see and to perceive a beautiful golden white light. Perhaps you see it like unto the sun on a beautiful summer's day, like we've seen these past several days. A golden white light. And this is positioned a short distance away from the top of your head. And you begin to notice that as you perceive this light, it begins to draw closer and closer to you. And it begins to actually touch the top of your head. This is part of you. And you notice that as it touches your head, you might well feel its warmth and its radiance. You might even feel the tingling as it enters your head and flows down your body, all the way down your neck and down to the base of your spine. And it flows into your arms. It fills your torso, into your legs, into your feet and out your toes. Your light also permeates all of your organs and glands and your muscles and tissues. All of the trillions and trillions of cells in your being are now filled with your light. And you know that this light is part of you, and you are welcoming this light. You begin to notice that your heart is also filling with this light. The energy center of your heart in the center of your chest is now filling with this light. And as it fills with light, it feels as if your heart is expanding and actually filling your chest. As your infinite light fills your heart, it even feels as if your heart is expanding way beyond your physical being. It expands even beyond your abode, where you're sitting now. This light expands and fills the entire town or province or state where you're located. Your light begins to fill the entire hemisphere of the earth, not just the northern hemisphere, but the southern hemisphere as well. And you suddenly realize that your light is now filling the entire world. The entire world is now filled with your light, and all the life forms, all the people, all the plants, all the animals, all the kingdoms of the ocean and the seas, they are filled with your light. There is in truth no separation. And your opportunity is to allow your love and light to make all things right. As they are part of you, you are part of them. Therefore, you are able to love you just as you are, and you are able to love all of them just as they are. There is no separation. The separation is a misunderstanding, an illusion perhaps. And as you love you, as you allow yourself the gift of saying to you, I love you, I love you, you are really saying, I love me. This is sacred for you. And as you say, I love you, you are able to also say, I'm sorry. Why are you sorry? Because for a brief time, you forgot who you were. And who you are is love and light. And our journey on the earth plane is that we are going to forget from time to time that which we are. So you can say, oh, I'm sorry, I forgot. I'm sorry. I'm sorry, high self. I forgot for a moment that which I am. Please forgive me. Please forgive me. And in that moment, you are forgiven. You've never been condemned, so there's no need for forgiveness. But you feel forgiven, and then you're able to express gratitude. Thank you. Thank you. I love you. I'm sorry. Please forgive me. Thank you. And as you hold that resonance within you to clean yourself of all of these energies, these misunderstandings, as you clean within you, the outer is also cleaned. Like cleaning a beautiful crystal goblet on the inside and the out, making it sparkle, making it vibrate with the highest frequency, which is your love and your light. All the rest is simply illusion, misunderstanding, and drama, which actually we could say has helped serve us to enable us to remember once again the truth of who we are through this process that has been so eloquently described by Cricket. So just allowing this immense love and light to fill your being, to remember that which you are. That which you are is an infinite being of love and light. Nothing can ever diminish the magnificence that you are already. We are all learning to practice and master this remarkable skill. This is our crucible of learning, our playground of adventure. And we are mastering these skills until we are able to do it all of the time unconsciously, until we have reached unconscious competence, just like driving a car. Or performing a skill that you know so well. love you. I'm sorry. Please forgive me. Thank you. I'm sorry. Please forgive me. Thank you. I love you. And just allowing yourself to sit for a few more moments in this place of ease and relaxation, remembering the profound truth of that which you are already. O blessed infinite being of love and light, bravely coming forth to awaken to the truth, to the magnificence that you are already, to bring your love and light as a beacon to others. To be of service to your magnificent self and to be of service to others. None can diminish your light. None. Within this space now, you embrace this truth for you. I love me is a frequency that's exceedingly helpful to you. All else simply is whisked away like water off a duck's back, like dust in the wind. You are an infinite being of love and light. You are magnificent beyond measure already. You are a precious child of God, a son, a daughter of the universe. And just holding that frequency for a minute or two. And then after a minute or two, Jackie will speak and ring the bell, and we'll complete this time. Love and blessings to you always.
May all beings be happy. May all beings be healthy. May all beings find peace.